Hi folks, Bob Akmens here, Bob Akmens Sports. We want to welcome you to our website. This is the first of 3 parts of our introductory basketball video. Please watch all 3 parts. In this first part we're going to talk about college hoops and why it's different from betting any other sport. We'll talk about totals and why bookies hate you if you bet totals. In the second part we'll talk about the mind of the pro athlete and the wit and witticism of Charles Barkley and how it can make you money. In the third part we'll cover some more Barkleyisms and why the NBA is going down the tubes, and finally we'll discuss the WNBA. Now let's get started and let's talk about the interesting things we have to say about basketball. Let's discuss college and pro hoops. Let's start with that and the unique challenges they present to all handicappers. Now, 2 major things set basketball handicapping apart from the other sports. First, the magnitude of importance for each score during the game is least of any of the sports. I mean, you'll never win a hoops game 2-0, but you will win a baseball game 1-0. And secondly, the size of even an NBA team is limited to just 12 active players on the bench, some of whom will get splinters in their butts the whole game and not even play. Bob Akmens Sports handicaps 3 discretely different forms of basketball: NCAA college hoops, the NBA, and the WNBA. Now let's do what your teachers told you to do in those boring essays. We'll compare and contrast these quite different forms of hoops action. Is there anything really more continually exciting than watching a top-notch college hoops matchup? I mean, I love watching baseball, but it's often like a war, a few minutes of exciting terror or elation, depending upon whether you're on the losing or winning side, and many minutes of ho-hum waiting. Not so with college hoops. It's just exhilarating. And because these kids see a real chance of making the pros, though very few do, most of them are not yet jaded in their attitude toward the game. They dive for balls. They usually try hard almost all the time, though these days you see altogether too much tood on the hardwood courts. As to handicapping college hoops, it's a lot of work. A lot of work. On a typical Saturday in January, you'll have more than 100 games on the board. You know, that's a couple hundred teams to keep track of and analyze. And unless you have an almost unlimited amount of free time, you just can't do that and hold down a job at the same time. That's one of the reasons I got into this crazy business. I couldn't do justice to my great day job where I was making more money than any 20-something should have been making, and being able to spend the time to handicap all those games and win more than I would lose. So I took a gamble, folks, and I chose a life of gambling. But trust me when I say it's paid off many, many times over what I ever imagined it would or even could. One of the great truths I learned many years ago about betting college hoop games is this: beware of the road favorite. Unless you have a very valid reason for laying points on the road with a college hoop squad, you should be cautious. The home court advantage is far and away the greatest overall in college hoops compared to other sports. There are some arenas where the line on the home team will actually swing 6, 7, 8 points or even more from what it might be playing that very same team on the road. You know, I know about this firsthand, folks. I played some college ball years ago. It wasn't at the top level, but I learned that the road is a very, very lonely place for almost all college players. Always remember this: while these kids may look like strong specimens of manhood, so many of them are just that, kids. And many are stunted emotionally. Realize that these young dudes have been coddled and treated like demigods for years before they get to the top college programs. You know, it's getting so out of hand that I recently read a 14-year-old in the 8th grade had signed a letter of intent to play at Southern Cal. Why not just measure them when they're in their cradle and snatch them away from their mothers and have them raised by breastfeeding she-giants, huh? Here's an indisputable fact. The fragile egos of so many young, incredibly immature college hoops players are often shattered when they face what they find so hard to handle. Crowds that don't adore them and actually gasp, treat them with hostility. That's why you'll see road teams collapse on leads much more often than you'll see home teams blowing big margins in front of their adoring fans. Does this mean you should just bet home teams? Of course not. You should play the team you believe has a good shot of covering the spread, or playing an under or an over in a game where the line looks out of whack to you. That is, assuming you have a sound reason to believe that line truly is out of whack, and you're not just going on feel or intuition alone. Now, speaking of totals for a moment, let me tell you another truth I've learned doing this for a living. Bookies don't like totals. Or more accurately, bookies don't like the guys who bet lots of totals. Now, why is that? Well, Let's look at NBA game lines, side and total, to better understand this. If you have the biggest mismatch in the entire league, what will the line on that side be? If you rarely hit minus 20, I'll be amazed. More like maybe 14, 15-point favorites. Now let's assume there's a great earth-shattering upset in this game and the crap team actually wins straight up by, say, 10 points. This is a genuine shocker, huh? Not only did the bum team win, but they covered by maybe 25 points. And for most players, which is what serious gamblers are called, I'm not referring to the ball players, that game is a big deal, and there will be a lot of discussion about that result. But now let's look at the total on that same game. Let's say the line of the total for that very same game was 190, and now let's say the final score with the dog winning was 120 to 110. Are most players shocked that the total won 40 whole points over the line? Not really. Virtually the entire discussion on sports talk radio shows or online forums will be that the lousy team beat the good team. You see what I mean? Also, the range for totals lines in the NBA can be from the mid-160s all the way into the 230s. A 70-point range can exist in NBA totals, but only maximally about a 20-point range for sides. All the more reason books hate totals. So for the sharp player who has a sound methodology for picking totals, they can invariably be beaten for a higher percentage than one can beat sides. As I write this in early March 2008, I'm on a long run of publicly posted college hoop totals where I'm 50 and 17. So I assure you, you can beat totals better than sides. That concludes part 1 of this video. Make sure that you look at part 2 and part 3. We have some interesting tips here. We welcome you to the website. Look around. We thank you so much for visiting, and we hope that we can do some business with you in the very near future. Thanks again.